Welcome to the Military Transition Academy. Today we have Bill Kieffer with us, and we are going to discuss insights from the employer side of the desk. Welcome, Bill, to the show. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Misty. It's great to be here. I've enjoyed chatting with you for the last several years, I guess.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm an independent coach and advisor. Spent 12 years as an Army officer, 22 years as an HR and talent management executive in Fortune 500s. And for the last 6 years, I've been an entrepreneur, having started two different companies, one a for-profit and another one, Veteran Career Journey, a nonprofit dedicated to helping service members, veterans, and spouses in their career transition from the military work world to the civilian work world. We do something a little different than a lot of folks. We offer insights from the employer side of the desk. I've
Yes.
been on both sides of that transition desk, and I've succeeded and failed in both sides. But I've
Same.
seen too many times. Yeah, I've seen too many times where veterans just don't know what employers want and need, and quite frankly, employers don't know what veterans bring to the table. So that's the little different spin that we have. Very practical, very pragmatic, kind of no nonsense insights to help folks succeed.
Yeah, and I love the perspective because I'm an HR professional as well. And when I went into the civilian sector and worked at Continental Tire for 4 years, I made it my mission to make sure that I mentored and coached veterans about what it's actually like in the civilian sector and,
Right.
what the civilians are. And I know when I was serving in the military, I'm not sure if you relate, but everybody had a perspective about the civilian sector and civilians and this and that. And I was like, none of you have actually been in the civilian sector. How do you know?
Right.
And so then when I went into, myself, into the civilian sector, I made it my mission to really share the insights from the employer side of the desk, from
Yeah.
the recruiter, from the hiring manager. And really, I've been following you since my military transition started, and you've been such an influence in my journey. And
Thank
so I'd
you.
love for us to take, this episode and give some tips and tools from the employer side of the desk. So let's kind of set the stage. We
Okay.
have a military service member that is contemplating separation or retirement, or maybe enduring a medical discharge or about to leave the military. They're going to take their uniform off. And so, from your perspective, what should they be doing right now?
Well, the very first thing they need to do is understand that the world is going to be different. Just understand it's going to be different. One of the worst things, to be that guy or that gal in the new world is to go, here's how we used to do it in the military.
Oh
Yeah,
my
you don't want to
gosh.
be that
Yeah.
person, right? I think
Yeah.
the other thing that's really important is to sit back and understand who you are.
Yeah.
Who are you? What do you bring into the party, good and maybe bad? And how do you define success? It's kind of a military truism. You're probably not going to hit a target you haven't identified.
Yep.
If you don't know what you're looking for, your transition is going to be slower and more difficult than it really could or should be, right? So who are you? What makes you tick? What are your priorities? What are your pet peeves? What are those things that really motivate you? What are you passionate about? What are you capable of? Okay. And what do you bring into the party? That kind of rolls in there too. I have this set of experiences, this set of education. I have these interests because those are important too. All right. And how do you define success? What does good look like? One of the analogies I use is, if somebody wants to get out and they're passionate about competitive tuna fishing, right? I don't know if you've ever seen it. Oh God, what is
Yes.
it? Killer Tuna or whatever that
Yep.
show is. Yeah. But the reality of their situation is that they're going to move back to family in Toledo, Ohio. Not a lot of tuna fishing going on here in
Exactly.
Toledo. Okay. So they got to be mindful of how they define success. If success to me means I'm going to Toledo, then you can't be tuna fishing, not as a full-time gig and probably be successful, right?
Yeah.
If success is winning whatever that fishing competition is, you might want to rethink where your base camp is, right?
Yeah, and I preach this similar thing, always define your definition of success. I always kind of take it a little bit further and like, for a year, right? We have this 5, 10 year plan that we're supposed to have
Hmm.
because the military,
Hmm.
and society has really kind of brainwashed us to think that we have to plan so far out. But the truth of the matter is that once you spend some time in the military or at a company or whatever, you become that organization in some way, shape, or form. So you're going to need some time to figure out who it is that you actually are, what you actually like. So I love it when you say define your definition of success and then really discover who you are. And let's take it a little bit further. When we are in the service, we say, oh, I can't wait to get out because I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I can't wait to get out because of this, this, and this. And
Hmm.
so the next step is really to identify your non-negotiables. What is it that you want from your post
Absolutely.
career? So why don't you take us through that? How would someone do that?
Yeah. So, I'm glad you brought that up because while career transition is a highly emotional, highly personal life
Yes.
event, in some regards, it's nothing more than a problem solving and decision making activity. And if you can pull the emotion back just a little bit and go, okay, wait a minute, not just what does good look like, but how am I going to measure it?
Ah,
These are the things I absolutely must have. I know when I transitioned out, I got out because I went through a divorce. And I like to say, well, I don't hate to have to say it, but the reality is my life journey and my career journey came to a head, right? And I had to make a decision,
yeah.
either stay with the career that I loved and was good at, or be as close to and impactful in my kids' lives as I wanted to be. So I had to make a hard choice, right? That, even though I didn't think about it in these terms then, that defined my criteria. I knew there were two non-negotiable criteria: geography and financial security for my family. I didn't know anything else. That was it. So, what are your criteria? Think of the decision-making cycle.
Yeah.
What are your selection criteria? What are your evaluative criteria? And whether people realize it or not, they're going to do this. I think it's best to identify the criteria early so
Oh,
you can
yeah.
evolve them and iterate and maybe shore them up a little bit rather than waiting till you get an offer that goes, oh, geez, the money's pretty good, but it's maybe not where I want to be. But and the nature of the work is okay. Can I live with this? And meanwhile, the employer is sitting there, let's go, let's make a decision.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it's
so
it's important to know what you want too, and also to just extend yourself some grace and cut yourself some slack because you actually are not sure what you want. So
yeah,
Misty that retired in 2020 is very different than Misty today. And the
oh
first
yeah,
year at Continental Tire, it satisfied my definition of success for that time. But the third year, it did not. And so that's when I started to make a change. And I love what you said, like identify what it is that you want, your non-negotiables. So that way, when you are in an interview, and this is the thing, and you and I are on the HR side, don't ask a recruiter or a hiring manager, what's the culture like? We're not going to sit there and tell you that it's terrible or whatever it may be. So
yeah, 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 yeah.
you need to understand like what is it that you want. So as an example, if one of your non-negotiables is to be able to drop your child off at school, which means that you wouldn't be able to get into work until 8, and then you want to be home by 5, a question would be, take me through a normal kind of work day. What do the
Right.
hours look like? Instead of asking, how do you support families or whatever it may be. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always better to ask them to describe the experience,
Yeah.
a day in the life kind of a thing, a day in the context of whatever your interest is, than to say things like, hey, I'm really interested in dropping my kids off at 3. How's that work out? That sounds very self-serving.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, employers, recruiters, interviewers, we're selfish people. Okay. Not because we're inherently horrible. It's because we have business needs that need to be filled and we got a stack of applicants. I need to hear from the candidate that they are interested in doing two things, doing one thing to answer two questions. They need to convince me that they are one, the most capable of doing the work I need done successfully,
Yes.
and two, they're going to fit well and add value to the team. Full stop. That's it. Now, there's a lot of steps to get into that. You got to put it in an
Absolutely.
application or network with somebody, and then you get a phone screen or however the process works. But I'm sure you've seen this in every interview, the end questions boil down to some version of who's the best person to do the work I need done successfully and fit well and add value to the team. That's it.
Yep.
And folks come into the interview, and if I get a sense that they're more interested in how I can serve their needs versus how they can help me fulfill my business needs, it kind of takes a little bit of shine off their candidacy.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to, forget the 5 year, 10 year plan, at least from my perspective. And I coach and mentor several veterans a week. And this seems to be a really good process because when you interview, I always like to say the company, the recruiter, the hiring manager, the department manager, who's ever in the room, they're putting forth their best selves, right? They're representative. Like
Yep.
obviously they're trying to intrigue you, persuade you, inspire you, right? But you're doing the same. So it's kind of like a dating relationship. Like
Sure.
for the most
Sure.
part, we're not going to, showcase all of our flaws immediately, right? So if
Right.
you take this journey 1 year at a time, for the
Yep.
most part, you get to see the full revolution, right? Evolution, yeah, full evolution of the
Evolution. Yeah.
company, like onboarding, training, performance
Right.
evaluation, promotion. Like you get to kind of see what the company is all about. You can't see that in 3 months, 6 months. It gets a little bit clearer as you progress, but the 1 year really allows you to see, am I actually a good fit? But
Right.
most importantly, are they a good fit for you?
Yeah. And I think about it in terms of business cycles. Typically, it's about a year.
Yep.
Some are shorter, some are longer. But don't as a candidate, as a new employee, don't let yourself get pickled by the first couple of days.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
gosh. Yeah. When
Yeah.
everyone goes on LinkedIn, oh, I love this place. Wait, okay, wait.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so you got a love fest for the first 30 days, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden something pops up and you go, ooh, that kind of stung.
Yep.
So you got to be kind of a grown up in the room here. You have to kind of be an adult about this and go, nothing's perfect, but on the whole, what are my criteria?
Yeah.
And how does what I'm experiencing now line up with what they promised and what I expected? And if they line up, great, awesome, keep going.
Yep.
If they don't line up well, then you kind of have to be thoughtful and pragmatic. You don't want to do anything rash. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've seen people go, this whole place is a bunch of uh, malarkey. I hate it here. It's not what they said. And go, okay, well, think about that. And I coach tons of folks, right? And you go, is it really?
Yeah.
Is it really? And let's just, and I have left jobs. I have left jobs. I won't get into the details of it because I had a fundamental moral disagreement with the owner. I left and I knew I didn't do it just rash. I thought about it and
Yeah.
I went, you know what? I don't know what the next step is, but I will not stay here. And that's okay. But understand if you make that kind of big decision, you now maybe have some big hurdles ahead of you, some big hills you're going to have to climb. And it'll happen. You'll find the next, and quite frankly, you're going to land better because you know
Yep.
better yourself, you know better what you expect, you know better what you'll tolerate. Um, but don't be rash.
Yeah. And your content over the years, your books, your LinkedIn posts, and just talking to you, it's really all about what am I learning? What am I earning? Right? Every job has sort of two goals. You want to learn. You definitely don't want to
Mhm.
be the smartest person in the room or the organization. That was my
Mhm.
favorite part of Continental Tire is that I always felt like I was definitely not the smartest person in the room. And whenever I entered a room, I felt like I was leaving with more knowledge, more skills, whatever. And I truly feel that way. In 4 years, I truly felt like I
Mhm.
leveled up, when it came to my professional development.
Mhm.
But also, some jobs can be where you're just earning. Maybe you've discovered that, hey, this is maybe not a good fit for me. And recognize the fact that companies change, people change, right? It is,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it is a business. And there are going to be some fundamental things that you may not agree with. But one thing that I've learned along the way is like, I always ask myself, is it unethical? Is it immoral? Is it illegal? As long
Yep.
as I can say no to those, because those things are important to me, right? I don't want to operate in an unethical environment. I don't want to
Right.
work with people that are immoral. And obviously, I don't want to be a part of anything that's illegal. As long as I can say no to those things, now I can troubleshoot. Is this my preference? My preference is not being honored here. I don't like,
Right.
and so when you are in a position, what can you learn from it? What can you earn from it? And then you can make
Absolutely.
some really good decisions in the future.
Yeah, I think, learning and earning are critical. The other is where can I add value?
Yes. Talk more about
Because
that because
yeah,
we,
at the end of the day, business is about performance, right? I
yeah.
I will argue to some degree that civilian businesses are more focused on results than the military experience overall.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're not performing, you're at risk. Okay. I've been through multiple companies that were had mergers or acquisitions. I worked for an air freight company, good company, U.S. based company. We're in what 136 countries. I ran global talent management for them. It was awesome. We got bought by Deutsche Bahn, the German railroad,
Oh, wow.
and I was on the integration team to merge. It wasn't just Bax Global was the name of the company and Deutsche Bahn. They were buying us to merge with a other company called Schenker. They do business today as DB Schenker, right? And talk about a shift. Holy smokes. Now, and it wasn't bad. Some of it was bad. Um, but it was different. It was very different, and I had to think about what am I learning? What am I earning? Okay. I was making
Yep.
good money. I was learning a ton. I'm going, where am I adding value?
Yeah.
And I knew I was adding value and I could identify where that was. And furthermore, I could tie it to the business value. See, and that's an important thing I think folks need to understand, military transitioning folks and others, is adding value for the sake of what I value is one thing. But if you want to stay employed and continue to grow, continue to promote, continue to take on more responsibility, you better understand how you're adding value to the business.
Yes.
So along those lines, at one point I was VP of HR for at Dana Corporation, the automotive firm. At the
Yep.
time, they were about $7 billion. I was head of HR for the commercial vehicle group, Class 8 trucks, big truck, big heavy truck, right? We were about $1.7 billion worth of business. And the boss, the president, great guy. He goes, "Hey, we need to put up a scorecard for HR and this and that." And I thought, what matters to him? Not what
Yes.
matters to me.
Yeah.
What mattered to him was math, numbers, dollars.
Yep. Metrics. Yeah.
Yeah, and not just metrics, but money metrics.
Yep.
I had to tie back the HR activity to dollars because money is the commodity of business.
And that's
It's a
hard to do because HR doesn't make money.
correct.
Yeah.
So, there's two in a for-profit company, there's two ways to be successful, right? Make more and spend less,
Mm,
right? So I had to figure out what metrics actually mattered to the bottom line profitability and shareholder value. And that's how my scorecard got built. For the top level. Then I turned it into,
yep.
actionable process kind of things below that. So you got to speak their language and you got
Yes.
to understand where the value's being added from a business standpoint, not just from a, I'll say, feel good standpoint.
Yeah, I love that perspective because about my third year in, I started realizing like I was getting the highest, performance evaluation scores or one of the highest score, but I never felt like I was actually adding value to the business. Now, I know I added value every day, I mean, I know that I did. I know that I
Mhm.
was my team's anchor. I know that I was a friendly, friendly person on the floor. I really connected with people. Like I know I added value. But when I truly looked at adding value for the business, I almost felt like overpaid and underutilized. And that's when I sort of had to make a decision. I
Mhm.
know that I have more to give. I can't give it here. And that's why I made a decision, to resign. But when it comes to adding value, I tell veterans all the time when you get into a new role, especially in the civilian sector, allow yourself to be a beginner, soak it all up, go through the training, go through the onboarding. If there's no training and no onboarding, do your very best to train
Mhm.
and onboard yourself, so to speak.
Yep.
Ask people, don't say,
Yep.
oh, this sucks, I don't have it. Like, when did you ever go into a new role in the military and there was 100% onboarding and training? So don't get
Right.
it twisted. Like, every organization, for the most part, has its diamonds and its warts. And sometimes training and onboarding, it's unfortunate, but sometimes training and onboarding sort of takes a back seat to, other things that,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
And
So
there's a reason for that, I think.
go ahead.
Okay. Training and development and that kind of work in the civilian world is often seen more as a cost than an
Yes.
investment.
So,
Okay. Hey,
yeah,
where can we save money if revenue's not coming in? We got to cut expenses. Well, we're going to cut the training. Why? Because most business leaders, many business leaders, don't see it as a near-term investment in business success. They might consider it a long-term investment, but if you got to save current cost, you got to figure out where those dollars are going, right? And I think there's a root level below that even. And I think there's two real issues for that. One is the short-term focus of most businesses, especially if you're
yeah,
publicly traded. You don't make the month or the quarter, you're probably not going to be here at the end of the year. Okay.
exactly.
So that short-term focus on cost and dollar financial performance, I think drives part of this. The other part is the different, understandable differences in how the military and business develop talent.
Yeah.
The military has to grow their talent. They got to build it, right? I
Yep.
mean, what are you gonna do? Run to your opponent and ask for a new sergeant major? I mean, it doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah. So you have to grow it. You have to develop it.
You got to build it, right? So the business need in the military is critical for the focus on investment in development. In the civilian world, we go buy talent. We
Yep.
just go buy it. And a lot of reasons for that. Now, not that no training happens, not that no leader development happens, but we always have the ability to go to the market and buy somebody. We always
Absolutely.
have that ability. And
Yep.
that makes it kind of an easy button to go, we're not going to invest in that training.
Yeah. And that's why when you are in the position, and this was the best advice that I got right before I retired. She said, be a gap filler.
Mm-hmm.
Fill in the gaps, whatever the company needs. If you want to truly make a name for yourself, if you want to prove how valuable you are, be a gap filler. So when I took on my position, I learned the position, then I filled in any gaps that were needed, and
Mm-hmm.
my skill set is public speaking, training, relationship building, whatever. And so I filled in that gap. So be a gap filler. There's a lot of talk on LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram about, not doing anything outside of your duty description. Most states are at will, so none of us are signing a contract. We might be
Right.
signing an offer letter, but that is
Mm-hmm.
not a contract.
Correct.
I think people get it twisted. Your job description are parameters,
Mm-hmm.
boundaries that you can go in and out of. And you should
Yeah,
go
and there's always that magical line at the bottom, other duties
all
as assigned.
yes.
Yeah,
And people hate it. But it's
yeah.
and I'll tell you, and maybe you can speak from it, if you want to be valuable, you have to prove your value. You have to be a generalized specialist, T-shaped, right? Depth and breadth of knowledge, where you have
Yeah.
experience, you have education. You can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that is how, and maybe you could speak to this, but if you want to get promoted, if you want to grow and develop in a company, if you want opportunities, um, you need to go outside of that duty description.
No, absolutely. I've always said, and I coach people about this, the worst thing anybody can do for a business is exactly what they're asked to do. It's the
Perfect.
worst thing you can do because
Yeah.
now you're just you're anybody, right? And when I think about succession and promotion and career management, I think in terms of A's, okay?
Yep.
Do the people have the aspiration? Do they
Mm,
even want to do what we need them to do next and down line, right? Do they have the ability? The ability to perform today and the ability to grow? Do they have the agility? Can they move? Can they shift with the time? Because what we're doing today will be different than tomorrow. Because the
Yeah.
business landscape and business conditions and customer wants, needs, and demands, they always change. So are they able to do what we need to do today? And are they agile enough to get ready for tomorrow? Right. And then, if they have all that, it'll show up in how they behave. It's not just in how they answer the question. So, I don't know how many times, I came in, my first kind of HR civilian job was a training manager for an 1,100 person air freight facility. Okay. I
Mm.
stayed with the company 11 years. Apparently I did something right. And I
Yeah.
continued to grow the whole time. Right. But there were topics that were related to talent training, like performance management was an automatic fit. Guess what? They needed help with that. I had done that work in the military. I took that on. What is
Yep.
performance management tied to? Compensation, bonus programs. How does that all tie? Oh, career ladder. So you find ways to appropriately involve yourself, not for self promotion, but
Yeah.
for the good of the company. Because if you're doing it for self promotion, then you know what? I'm going to smell that, and I'm going to be like, "You're here for you. I don't need that." So you got to find ways to identify where you can add value, make yourself available, express your interest, and then you got to work hard. It takes hard work, man.
Yeah, it really does. And, I think veterans struggle based on, my coaching and mentoring sessions, you know, veterans struggle with finding purpose,
Oh yeah.
meaningful work, doing work that matters. So,
Mhm.
from the employer side of the desk, speak to that. What about purpose? What about meaningful work? What about work that matters?
Yeah, I think sometimes people miss what the purpose is because they're so caught up in what their purpose was.
Woo! Say it again, Bill.
Yeah, I think people get lost in what their purpose is because they're focused on what their purpose was. It's
Yeah.
pretty rare that somebody's going to have a job as, fun and sexy as jumping out of airplanes and landing in, new countries and taking on aggressive others, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's jobs like that, and that's okay. If you want to do that, go do that. But, it's probably best to tell this by telling a quick story if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I took on that training manager job, we moved about 3 million pounds of freight a night, right? And we worked at night, so a lot of my days, work days, were at night. And one night, about 2 in the morning, I'm standing there. We're in a 300,000 square foot facility. We got about, I don't know, 500 people on the ground, 100 forklifts moving around, and I'm watching boxes move back and forth on conveyors, going, "We're kicking boxes. This is ridiculous. There's nothing interesting about this." And I was really starting to think I made a mistake. And the general manager, good leader, not a veteran, but a really good leader, great guy. He happened along the way, and he goes, "Hey, Bill, how you doing?" And have you ever had one of those moments where you go, "How honest do I really want to be right now?"
Yeah, very often, actually.
Yeah. So I said, "Well, Steve, I'm not feeling it, man.
Yeah.
All I see is boxes moving. We're just kicking boxes. I don't get it. This is not fulfilling." And he stopped and he said, "Look, every box represents commerce. Every box represents the growth of a small company to a big company, a new
Mm.
product getting out to new folks." And he started, and the list was, and then he said, we're employing people that wouldn't otherwise be employed. We're providing training and benefits. The list went on and on and on.
Wow.
And I went, hmm. So here's my caution to folks, and it's common and it's understandable. If you find yourself going, "I don't have a purpose here," check yourself and dig a little bit below the obvious. I was actually renewed by that conversation. Now, 2 in the morning, I wasn't exactly, you know, eager to stay up again the whole day, but it renewed my faith that there actually was some purpose there, and what I was doing was enabling that purpose to come to life. One of the gentlemen I coached, former SF guy, he said, "I was out liberating the oppressed, right?"
Yeah.
He took a job in medical sales, and he was like, "I'm selling equipment." And then one day he went in and he was in a hospital, and he ran into a family whose kid was in the hospital. and had benefited from the equipment he sold. He goes, you know what? He had this epiphany. He goes, I was liberating the oppressed. Now I'm liberating the afflicted.
Whew.
And then he had a sense of purpose. And then he was able to engage. And then all those negative thoughts that were weighing him down started to shed a little bit. So, but
Yeah.
the purpose can be there if you're willing to look for it. But if you automatically say it ain't there, it's going to be hard to find.
Yeah, and that's why when you're defining your definition of success and then also establishing what your purpose is, my advice always is to first start with intangibles, right? The intangibles. So, my definition of success is to have time freedom, work on creative projects, and work with people that want to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if
Mm-hmm.
you take that definition of success, that truly can be, implemented in almost anything that I do, right?
You're
And
right. Right.
personally and professionally. And when I think about my purpose, because this was something I did the year prior, I established that, I did a whole bunch of personality tests. I did a whole bunch of career transition workbooks. I did tons of webinars, whatever, trying to find my purpose. And it really came down to no matter what I do and where I'm doing it, I just want to help people become better human beings who
Mm-hmm.
then go and help people become better human beings. Like, I really believe in the it takes one to start the change. If and I always use this story. I am deathly allergic to red ants. And when I say deathly, I need an EpiPen. So
Okay.
in the summer of South Carolina, I have to be mindful everywhere I walk, where I put my hands, whatever, and I have to carry an EpiPen with me. And people always tell me, like, Missy, I can't make a difference. I'm just one person. And in my opinion, I'm like, one red ant gets me one. I am, if
Mm-hmm.
I don't have my EpiPen, I'm done. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the value of one person. You may not be able to see it immediately, but you can make a difference. So when you are looking at your purpose, it shouldn't be tied to tangibles, things that could be taken away. I
Right.
develop better
Right.
human beings in the gas station, at the VA, at Continental Tire, at That's to PM, on LinkedIn, at the ball field, at the ring ceremony that I'm going to for my son. And so your purpose needs to be a little bit different than like when I was in the military, writing casualty reports for those families that
Right.
lost their loved ones. Like that's a huge purpose. Quite frankly,
Yep.
I don't want to be a part of that. You know what I mean? Not anymore.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, you talk about assessments and finding purpose and all this. I'm certified in the Y operating system assessment. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
you've heard about it, and I won't bore
Yep.
you with all the details of it. But for me, it was really enlightening. I always thought my why, my purpose, was to go make an impact on businesses and organizations, right? And I still enjoy doing that. But what I really found, this instrument's good because it helps identify your why, your
Yep.
how, and your what, or your purpose, your process, and your promise, right? So my why is to make sense of things.
Yeah.
I help make sense of things. My how is through what they call mastery. I drive people crazy with the level of detail I go into. I dive deep and wide because I want to know everything I can possibly know about something before we make a decision or take an action. Okay. And that's because my what or my promise to the world is trust. Trust matters to me. So um, having that kind of clarity, in hindsight, it actually said, oh, well, that explains why that went so well or didn't. And
Yeah.
it's helped me understand moving forward where and how I can put that stuff into play and where and how I might want to.
Yeah.
I'm heavily involved in our community. I don't know, 3 times appointed and 4 times elected to public office. And the make sense, mastery, and trust thing has frustrated some of my colleagues, but it has added a lot of value along. I'll give you a quick example.
Mm-hmm.
It was a small town. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I love the place, right? And have always been on municipal wells. We get our water from wells we own in our town.
Hmm.
Well, that's getting really expensive and really highly regulated, and it's really hard to manage. So we've had a 10-year discussion on whether we join a county regional water system, right? A lot of pros, a lot of cons. Some folks automatically said yes, some said no, and I had 93 questions. literally 93 questions. I wrote them down. And
That's
I said, I
great.
will not decide until we get these 93. So to see how that comes into play and then to understand what that means in terms of what things I might want to engage in. What kind of work do I want to do? What kind of
Yeah.
clients do I want? Hugely important. So
Yeah.
good for you for doing that assessment work and understanding all that stuff, all that about yourself, because it helps you better understand how you might fit in the opportunities that lie ahead.
Yeah, the best thing about now is that we are in the veterans are supported era. So 4 years ago, when I was retiring, I watched, several people, several of my mentors, Gary DeVault, Michael Lindley, retire, and I kind of watched their ups and downs and watched their lessons learned and was able to tap into them. So then when it was time for me, it really came down to exactly what you said we should do when we're thinking about transitioning, any sort of military transition, career transition. Number one,
Mhm.
know who you are. This is work that you can do right now. What can you do today so you can transition tomorrow, whatever that transition is? This is discovery work. This is stuff that we should be doing daily. Like, who am
Yep.
I? Right? And
Right.
if your life is really defined by a uniform, a rank, a title, a house, a car, I that's why I always try to identify, what success looks like, purpose and stuff that's tied to nothing that can be taken away, right?
Right.
And so
Right. Yeah.
identify
Along,
who you are. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, along those lines, when I got out of the military, I was a captain on a promotion list to major, right?
Mm,
My identity was Captain Kieffer. That's who I was, right? And I was really looking forward to being Major Kieffer, right? Um, and I hated it because my identity was gone.
yeah.
But I learned that lesson at, 30 some years old. My dad was a physician. His whole life goal was to be a physician. When he retired, he was still a doctor, but he wasn't practicing. And his
Mm,
identity at, 75 years old was gone. And he didn't know how to deal with it. And he wound up just having a horrible retirement. So at some point, your identity is going to change.
yeah.
Whether it's sergeant this, chief that, doctor this, whatever, your identity is going to change. And if you can figure out what the identity is beyond the rank, the title, the uniform, the job, you're going to be in a way better place, not just from a career standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a societal standpoint.
Yeah, and one thing that everyone needs to understand, especially the military community and the veteran community, is that, civilians are really no different from us. And so if you look at the most recent example that I can think of, and I'm a big sports fan, but, Deion Sanders and Warren Sapp. So Deion Sanders is the coach, of a Colorado school, college, and people are really talking him up. He should go to the NFL, whatever, right? And so someone finally asked him, hey, would you ever consider going to the NFL? And he opened up the answer with, he's like, I am the son, the son of God. And like, I mean, I'm a child of God, and he's like, and my purpose is to develop, you know, these men,
Yep.
these young men. And he's like, I can't do that in the NFL. So no, I'm not
Right.
going to the NFL. I love that answer because he was like, I'm a child of God. So he knows exactly who he is and where his identity is. And my purpose is to develop these young men. I can't do that here, but I can do it here. Right. And
Yep.
that's one thing that we need to realize too is like our first civilian job. I mean, I think the data says 43% or 63% of veterans will leave their, first civilian job within the first year. Like our first
Yep.
civilian job may not be where we can be ourselves and where we can, fulfill our purpose. But that's the beauty of being in the civilian sector is now we have choices. Most states are at will and we don't have to
Right.
stay. And then he
Well,
went
and
on.
that's,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, then he went on to talk about Warren Sapp. And when Warren Sapp, the bus, right? I think that's him. But when he
Yeah.
retired from the NFL, he went through a really, really rough time. And you can Google everything, a lot of legal trouble, a lot of whatever it may be. And then Dion reached out to him and said, hey, why don't you come to Colorado and just give it a year? just see if you like it. And you should see him now. He's like he calls the young men the babies. He's like, my babies, I'm in it for the babies. And and he has a big smile
Yep.
on his face. And he's like, I now know who I am. I know what my purpose is. Like, that's an important part. Regardless if you're wearing a uniform for 4 years or 30 years, you should still do the work. Who are you if that uniform is taken away? Who are you
Yep.
if your marriage, ends? Who are you if someone really important in your life passes away? Who are you if the
Absolutely.
economy changes and all your money is gone? That when
Right.
you strip away all of that materialistic stuff, that's who you are. So discover who
Yep.
that person is now.
So a couple things on all that, and I love those insights. They're great. You're right. Different studies will tell you 45 to,
Yeah.
55% leave in the first year. The interesting follow on to that is up to 80% leave by year two.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a couple
I love
points
it.
on that. One, that's not terribly different than a new college graduate.
Nope.
Okay.
But
So
it's
what?
also a really important correlation because what's the college graduate doing? Figuring out who they are, what they want to do, whatever.
Exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
most of the time, I was a statistic. I left my first job in 8 months, right? And it's not because they're, in some cases it is, but it's generally not because they're not performing. I
Nope.
mean, they can do the work, but it's not satisfying. It's a personal decision. They're not fulfilling purpose, this, that, and the other thing, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
you're spot on. And along those lines, I think a lot of times transitioning service members think that next gig is the terminal objective. It's not. It's a step on the journey. If it happens to be the last step, you happen to land in nirvana, great. If not, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Perform well. If it doesn't fit, find your new place and go perform well there. No big deal. But
Yeah.
when you talk about identity and all that stuff, I had tough time in my transition from the military. I got my feet up underneath me, and I had this identity as a corporate HR leader. And I'm kind of the operational talent management guy, right? I tie the whole thing to business operations. I'm not the process guy. I can do it, but that's not the value I add, right? In 2018, I was 2 bonus cycles from never working again, right? It's like, okay, we're in good shape. 2018, I won't bore you with I had a massive heart attack, right?
Hmm.
That's why I left corporate America. 70-hour weeks and 50 to 70% global travel takes a toll on a guy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the doctor said, I need you off work for, probably 6 months or so. I went back in 7 weeks. My wife was like, what are you doing? My definition of success was money. I said,
Yeah.
with 2 bonus cycles, I can do it. And she stopped me, and God bless her for saying this. She goes, you got a big job and you're doing good stuff. She goes, but you're a big wheel in a big machine. She goes, do you want to make income or do you want to make impact?
Ooh.
And I thought, uh, I think I'd like to embrace the and.
Yeah.
She said, well, okay, let's pick one here, big guy. And that caused me to go, you know what? I'm not making the impact. Maybe I don't need to make those last 2 bonus cycles. We're living a nice life. What do I really want to do? It's not just who am I? Excuse me, all that became part of the discussion. And I kind of went from you know what? I'm going to take a little risk on the income because I think there's opportunity to make impact. I took a 99% pay cut. Literally.
Yeah.
Good news is I'm back to an 89% pay cut. So things are getting better.
Yeah.
Um, but it caused me to be a better me. Okay. I don't need what I thought I needed. I'm not wanting for anything. We're leaving for Florida here tomorrow in January, February. I don't know, sometime soon. We're going to the Bahamas. I mean, we have heat in the house and water. The point of the matter is those things that I thought were important were at one time, but they aren't necessarily as important now. So it caused me to sit back and go, okay, wait a minute. Am
Yeah.
I living on old expectations? And I think
Mm.
this is important for people in transition. Am I living on old expectations? And are those expectations realistic for where I am now and helpful for where I could go in the future?
Yeah, I love that conversation. And I thank you so much for sharing that because, I talk to veterans all the time and they're like, well, I'm worth six figures. Okay, six-figure salaries require six-figure work.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you just
Yep.
told me that you want work-life balance and you want this and you want that. Like, just for the record, if like I was 100% compensated for at Continental. I never thought that I was underpaid. I mean,
Right.
everywhere I looked, to my right, to my left, I was given more opportunity, more money, more this, more that. Like, I was taken care of 100%. I know my
Hmm.
story is not the same story of every person at Continental, but I had the best HR manager and the best leader I've ever worked for, Nicole. Like, she was awesome and I was very well taken care of. But even in the midst of that, the best camaraderie I've ever had, the best HR manager, the best people, seriously, like the best people in the world. I miss them. I've been without them for 11 months. Leaving the company was not hard. Leaving the team, it still
Sure.
shocks me, even
Sure.
with all of that, it wasn't enough because, and I'll share real quick, like when I think of my meritorious service medal and making, senior master sergeant in 14, 15 years, whatever it was, and being selected to do this and da da da. And I went to all these accolades that I earned in the military. When I look at that, and then I look at the relationship that I don't have with my son, because I've learned a very hard lesson that my husband has been trying to tell me for 20 years. The amount of time that you put into your children when they're young will equal the amount of time that they put into you when
Yep.
they're older.
Yep.
And I mean, I look around and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I have that meritorious service medal. No, I don't say that. Or so glad I have
Yep.
all this money in the No, I don't say that. I want to be the call that my son makes. I want to be the person that he talks to. I want to be involved in his life. And it takes a lot of time to do that now when he's 17 and he's already established. So
Oh yeah.
for all the veterans that are trying to decide what they want to do, after the military, like start with who you are, what is your purpose, what are your non-negotiables, right? And then how are you going to add value? You can do those four things, be those four things, no matter where you go.
Right.
You also have to look at what are you willing to give up?
Oh, 100%. Because you know the phrase "nothing's free in the world."
Yeah.
I was compensated well, and I paid a big price for it. I won't bore you with the details. I was
Most.
compensated well, and I paid a big price for it, including a massive heart attack. Right. So, yeah, no, critically important. And this is where the whole purpose and all that comes kind of ties together with what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
People go, well, in identity, I was an Air Force PJ, and it was exciting and all that. But now that I'm leaving, I'd like to be able to be at the kids' soccer games and do this and that, but I'd like six figures. Okay, well, this is that whole what are your criteria and how do they line up? If you want to fish for tuna, you can't go to Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Okay. What's that phrase? Those to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah.
You want to go make $250,000 a year, you're going to give $250,000 worth of effort,
Yep.
or you won't be making that money. And here's the other thing, people oftentimes get out and they go, here's how much money I want to make. That may be based in fact or it may not, but what they don't often think about is how much they need to make.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those are two
Identify
different numbers.
your bare minimum salary. That's the number one thing that my husband and I did. What is our bare minimum? What do we need to make to like, and the biggest thing for us was never to include our VA disability because
Yeah, yeah,
we hope that one day that goes away because that means I don't have any back pain and my husband doesn't have any issues, you know what I mean? But so we wanted to identify our bare minimum salary, like
yep,
what do we need to make, to pay our mortgage, all of our, electric, whatever. We don't have much debt. Other than that, we have no car payments, nothing. We just have a mortgage.
right,
What do we need
right,
to make? What's our bare minimum salary? That knowing that number actually opened a lot of doors because not only do I know what my definition of success is, I know my purpose, but now I know my bare minimum salary. So when I retired, I could have gone in or applied for maybe a HR manager or HR director job, but I didn't want to. I just wanted to
Right.
take it 1 year at a time. So I applied to be a HR business partner, which is
Mhm.
like a first sergeant equivalent, and I loved it. It was the best job ever,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I was paid my bare minimum and then progressed from there in the company. But I loved that job because it
Well,
really,
and that's a great story, and I
yeah,
appreciate that. My first job out of the Army paid 28 grand a year.
yeah, that's not,
But I knew I could do that for a very short period of time. And
yep,
I knew by doing that, I'm paying the bills, I'm staying afloat, I'm not digging into savings, and I could continue to network. My next job, I went from 28 to 90,
yep,
one move. And then that grew huge after that. So the story there is sometimes for especially, I'll say especially for senior transition folks,
yeah,
kind of the E7 and above, the O4 and above, and sometimes the O3s. It's like, get over yourselves.
yeah,
Sometimes you have to do practical things to get you from where you are on the journey to where you want to be, right? Do we have time for me to tell another quick story?
yeah. I was gonna
Okay.
say veterans don't like it when I say this, and I get a lot of slack about it, but you're not that special. Yes, you serve the country, absolutely. You're part of the 0.78%. It's not even 1% anymore.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, you're not that special. So you have to
Yep.
showcase that transferable skill set. You have to showcase the value that you bring. And that doesn't just happen. But go ahead.
So let's go there. That to me is the difference between capability and credibility.
Hmm.
You can have all the capability in the world,
Yeah,
but until somebody else sees that capability in the context of their world, their work, you're not credible. So
yeah, I
you
love
got to
that.
prove yourself, right?
Yep.
Capability undisclosed and unapplied and unrecognized does not make you credible. And credibility matters.
Yep. And in
Hi,
the
I'm a 31-year Green Beret colonel. Thanks for your service. So what?
yeah.
Here's the other thing. And wow, it got me going now, Misty.
No, good.
The oftentimes when folks are networking or in an interview or whatever, the interviewer or the networking connection will say, "So what'd you do in the military?" Or tell me about yourself. And what's the common thing? People spout off their resume. And sometimes they even use language that the other person's not going to. I screwed this up when I was first out, right? Hey, what'd you do in the military? And I proudly said I was a 90 Alpha 5 Papa 3 Romeo. They were like,
What does
and?
that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I'd help, right? So I explained to them as well. I was a tactical multifunctional logistics officer. I was airborne qualified, nuclear, biological, and chemical certified. And they went, and?
Yeah.
See, the question that they're asking isn't just the words you hear.
Yeah.
What they're saying, the words that are coming out are only half of what they're asking. What did you do in the military? Or tell me about yourself that's relevant to my needs. That's the
Yes.
key. Now, that's a little harder if you're just networking and you're not sure who they are. But if you're aware of that, you can formulate your answer better than just reciting your resume or using acronyms nobody's going to understand. So,
Yeah, when it comes to capability and credibility, as we wrap up, capability is what you're proving on your resume. Capability is what you're proving in the interview. Credibility
sure.
is what you do in the first year, right? And so, or really within the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but that it's important to understand the difference. And I think people
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Yeah. The capabilities, what have I done? What can I do?
Yep,
Credibility is what are you doing? The other
exactly.
way to say that. Yeah.
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 So
Awesome.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's good.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so as we wrap up, so you know, I love this conversation, and you and I always have some good conversations. You're killing it, with your books and putting out content. And I told you this, and I'm not just saying this, but like you have been a huge, part of my transition story. And it really all comes down to, as you are going through a career transition, whether it's a military transition or it's another career transition in the civilian sector, there are a couple key foundational things that we should do. We need to know who we are. We
Yep.
need to know what our purpose is, and we need to know how to add value. We also need to know, what are we willing to give? What are we willing to take? What's our non-negotiables, right?
Right.
So as we
100%.
wrap up, I'd love for you to share any other tips and tools that you think we need to know from the employer side of the desk.
Yeah, from the employer side of the desk, if you want to be attractive to me as an employer, you got to know what I want.
Yeah.
You got to focus on my needs, not yours. Okay. You got to know everything you just talked about yourself. Totally get it. But you have to understand what I, as an employer, am looking for. Okay. Now, there's ways to do that, right? You Google search, you network, you look at job postings and advertisements and that kind of thing. And a really good tip or trick or tool is the ask answer concept. Came out of the legal world. Find out if you know what kind of job you want to be a project manager for a cookie company in Missouri. I don't know. Let's make something up, right?
Sounds like a really good job, actually.
Well, depending on the cookies they make, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you find job descriptions about it, right?
Yes.
So, what do you do with that to make yourself a compelling candidate, to demonstrate your capabilities, your fit? You take a look at those documents. You take a look at everything you've gathered, because that's the menu of asks.
Yeah.
That's what the employer's asking for. And then you don't just stop there. And I actually have people do this when they get to that point when I'm coaching them. I have them put a left side of a piece of paper, Excel sheet, post-it notes, I don't care how they do it. On the left side, you put your asks. On the other side, you start to formulate your answer for every ask.
Yes.
They want 3 years experience doing this. They want PMP certificate, whatever it is, ask, answer, ask, answer, ask, answer. And I'm going to suggest that people do that even if they don't have a specific job they're looking for. Hey, I think I want to be a project manager. Great. Go figure out, look at some job descriptions, pull them down. What are they asking for? What are your answers, and where are the gaps?
Yeah.
And decide what you're going to do to close those gaps, or if closing that gap is interesting or worth your time and effort. So understand not just yourself, but understand what the employers want and need.
Yeah.
Totally critical.
One
Yeah.
question I've asked it, and I love it when people ask me as a recruiter. Now this could backfire if the recruiter doesn't know the answer, if the hiring manager doesn't know the answer, but I always like to ask, within the first 90 days, what are you expecting from this person to achieve, accomplish, establish, whatever it may
Yep.
be, right? However you want to word that question. And if you ask that early enough in the interview, then and hopefully there's some banter where it kind of allowed you to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're
Mm-hmm.
able to shape your answers because what you can, how you can add value, what you can give, whatever. Then you can
Yep.
shape your answers accordingly. But the goal is, I love when you first opened, you said something about, how can you add value to the business? What does the business need? How can
Yep.
I bring forth my capability in order to establish my credibility by doing these things, filling the gaps, whatever. But it really comes down to the business needs. And this is why I tell veterans all the time, if you're not hired or if you're terminated, probably 90% of the reason has nothing to do with you.
Oh, yeah,
Has,
absolutely.
it has everything to do with how you fit with the current team. That's why I'll be honest with you, I don't want to know why I wasn't hired. I just need to know that I wasn't hired.
Right.
Because personally, I mean, us as HR people, it would really do our company a disservice if we actually gave specific feedback, because that could be used against us, right? In
Absolutely.
litigations and stuff like
Presents
that.
a,
We have to be
presents a
careful.
tremendous amount of potential risk. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's how you fit into the culture, the business, the team. I had a recruiter tell me one time, she shared with me, she's like, look, we didn't recommend you for hiring because you seem like a very optimistic person. You said that you wanted to feel, close with your coworkers and you wanted to add value every day, blah, blah, blah. She's like, this is not the place for you.
Yeah.
She was saving me. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? That now
Mm-hmm.
that is unheard of from the recruiter side, but just because they can't, it's a huge risk. But just know that if you know who you are, how you add value, what your purpose is, any rejection is just going to equal in your mind wrong direction.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
what can you control, right? And focus on what you can add value to, how you can meet the business's needs.
Right. Right. No, 100%. I think one of the biggest issues that transitioning service members, especially, but anybody in career transition, it affects,
Yeah.
is when you're in career transition, get ready for more rejection than you've ever faced in your life.
Fail fast.
Fail
Fail fast.
fast, you're going to fail often. And how
Yep.
you handle that rejection is really a mark of your character, and how you grow from it is an amazing thing. I like to tell people that transition is a space unto itself.
Yeah.
Okay. It's that kind of swampy, murky, kind of horrible area between where you were and where you're going. And if you can learn from that journey through that swamp, you're going to be more value added on the other end. But
Yep.
yeah, you got to be resilient. You got to do it on your own. Build your network so you're not totally alone. Because all those processes and tools and structures that were in the military to help you, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're gone.
Yeah. And I'll be real with you. Like, of course, read the books and stuff, but you don't need another book. You don't need another checklist. You don't need another influencer. You don't need another informational interview. You just need to take action on the stuff that you've already learned. And most of us,
Yeah.
when I talk to men, talk to veterans and people that are in the career transition, most of us are not taking action. So it really comes
Yeah.
down to, taking action on the knowledge that we're all sharing. So Bill, as we wrap up, you are huge in the military transition space. You have lots of different books, lots of different resources out there. Last words, and how can people connect with you?
Okay. So words of encouragement first. Okay. Military veteran unemployment rates are at historically low levels. They're hovering right around 3% and have for years. The good news there is, if you want to work and you put in the work, you're going to be able to work. Okay. So there's huge opportunity in the world, but you got to have your eyes and ears open to see and hear it. And then you got to have that bias of action to go get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't like the phrase fake it till you make it, but sometimes you just got to move forward, um, knowing that, yeah, this may or may not work, but I'm moving forward. Transition moves at the pace of you.
Oh,
If you need,
so
if you
good.
need to take a break, take a break.
Yeah, I always like to say, be it until you see it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
be
there
it
you
until you
go.
see it.
Yeah,
And it's really simple. I just do it every day too. Like I woke up the other day and I wasn't feeling very pretty, and and I was like, ah, nope, I'm I'm pretty today. You know what I mean? Or I'm smart today. Or if you're downing yourself, like, nope,
yeah.
I'm competent today. So be it until you see it. Fake it till you make it is the same, but be it until you see it, because most of the time, we're the barrier. We're the
Well,
barrier.
I was just going to say, the
Yeah.
world's full of opportunity. Sometimes you just got to get out of your own way. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. Now, how do you get a hold of me? I'm really active on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn. William E. Bill
Yes.
Kieffer. You can get a hold of me through my nonprofit website, veterancareerjourney.org, veterancareerjourney.org, or you can go to my for-profit website, kiefer-associates.com. But yeah, looking forward to connect with everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I love the work you all are doing at Vesta PM.
Well, thank you. And again, I am so grateful that we are in the Veterans Are Supported era. But I remember in August 2019, I made this rash decision to retire, like literally like pressed the button and then went and called my husband and told him like, hey, I'm going to retire. And I went right to LinkedIn, and I found you. And
Ah,
your tips, your tools, just throughout my journey and everyone else that's feeding into the veteran community have been super inspirational. And really, I consider my transition smooth and successful, and it's because of people like you. You're the
oh,
first book
thank
you
you.
wrote, the book that you just released, and just the work that you do. So thanks for being a part of supporting veterans. Thanks for coming on to the podcast. And everyone, if you're not following Bill, go and follow him. But it really comes down to, knowing who you are, knowing what your purpose is, knowing what your non-negotiables are, and how do you add value. And you could do that in the military, and you can do it out of the military. Thanks, Bill. Enjoy talking with you.
Thanks, Misty. It's been a pleasure.